Mount Rushmore is under threat. That's the opinion of South Dakota's
Mount Rushmore, despite warnings that the event could lead to more infections.
Crowds gathered in disbelief as word spread that Mount Rushmore, one of the most visited landmarks in the United States, had been suddenly shut down. No gradual closures, no polite notices about renovations or seasonal maintenance, just a swift and startling order to close access. Visitors who had traveled from across the world were turned away at the gates, their plans disrupted by an announcement that carried with it a sense of urgency and dread. The decision was not framed as routine. It was framed as a reaction to something terrifying discovered within the monument itself. A revelation serious enough to halt everything immediately. The granite faces of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln loomed overhead as symbols of permanence. Yet the shutdown suggested that even such a monument might be harboring secrets too unsettling to ignore. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The closure did not arise from minor wear or an ordinary geological survey. The language used in the shutdown notice hinted at danger, at something beneath the surface that defied ordinary explanation. Mount Rushmore, carved into the granite of the Black Hills, has always been considered more than just stone and sculpture. It is a place steeped in history, symbolism, and controversy. To hear that something terrifying had been found there instantly captured the imagination of millions. What could have been uncovered that would justify sealing off the site so abruptly? The image of the monument, silent and inaccessible, made the discovery feel even more ominous. The Black Hills themselves have long carried a reputation for being layered with both natural mysteries and historical weight. The Lakota Sioux, to whom the land is sacred, have told stories for generations about the mountains being alive with forces that outsiders rarely understood. When Mount Rushmore was blasted and carved in the 20th century, much of that spiritual connection was disregarded. For decades, it seemed as though the land's secrets had been overwritten by the monument's political symbolism. Yet the sudden shutdown implied that something beneath the granite had not been erased. Instead, it had been waiting, perhaps only now revealing itself at a moment when modern technology or sheer chance allowed it to be found. The monument is not only an artistic achievement but also an engineering marvel, with internal tunnels and caverns built into the mountain during its construction. Few tourists know about these hidden spaces, but historians and engineers have documented them. It is in places like these, sealed chambers and unfinished corridors, that discoveries could easily lurk undisturbed for decades. The terrifying element of this closure seems to have come from just such a space. Imagine the unease of officials stumbling upon a hidden chamber deep within the monument, not in the open granite faces, but in the hollowed areas that most of the public never sees. What they might have found there, whether natural or crafted, had to be severe enough to convince authorities to stop every visitor in their tracks. Speculations spread quickly. Some pointed to geological instability, perhaps cracks in the granite that threatened to collapse part of the monument. But geological danger alone rarely prompts descriptions of terror. Others whispered of artifacts or evidence buried by those who once inhabited the Black Hills before Mount Rushmore was ever conceived. More chilling theories suggested biological discoveries, something living within the hidden chambers, fungi, spores, or even preserved remains that could pose a risk. The fact that the announcement avoided specifics only intensified the feeling of unease. The terrifying discovery remained unnamed, leaving people to imagine the worst. The implications of such a closure extend beyond the curiosity of tourists. Mount Rushmore is more than a destination. It is a symbol, etched into the identity of the nation. Shutting it down in response to a frightening find transforms that symbol into a question mark. What does it mean if beneath the carved visages of presidents lies something so disturbing that the site cannot be safely accessed? The image of the monument is one of stability, power, and timelessness, yet the discovery undermines that very image. Suddenly, Mount Rushmore is no longer just stone, but a place with hidden vulnerabilities and secrets. Communities surrounding the Black Hills, which rely heavily on tourism, immediately felt the shock. Hotels, restaurants, and tour companies faced cancellations as the closure rippled outward. The economic implications were significant, but the psychological ones were even greater. Locals who had always regarded the monument as a permanent backdrop to their lives now saw it as a site of mystery and potential threat. Conversations in Rapid City and Keystone took on a hushed, speculative tone. Was the danger geological, biological, or something entirely different? The fact that no clear answers were provided suggested that officials were grappling with a discovery far beyond ordinary categories. For historians and anthropologists, the shutdown sparked deeper questions about what layers of history had been literally buried beneath the monument. The Black Hills had been sacred long before Rushmore was carved, and many native voices had long argued that the mountain still held stories outsiders refused to acknowledge. Could the terrifying discovery be evidence of those stories? The possibility that something ancient and unsettling had been unearthed within the monument itself reframed Mount Rushmore from being merely a patriotic landmark to a contested site where history, culture, and mystery collided. The very silence around the nature of the discovery only magnified its power. Government agencies scrambled to control the narrative, but silence is often more potent than words. The absence of detail created a vacuum quickly filled with theories, each one adding to the sense of terror. When people are told that something terrifying has been found, but not told what it is, their imaginations run wild. In this case, the imaginations of millions were directed at one of the most iconic symbols of America. The mystery itself became a force of fear, proving that sometimes what is left unsaid creates more impact than what is revealed. The scale of Mount Rushmore also plays into the dread. These faces carved into the mountain are colossal, larger than life, and meant to inspire awe. If something hidden within or beneath them is threatening enough to close the site, then it suggests a danger equal in scale to the monument itself. Visitors who once looked up in admiration now found themselves imagining what could be lurking behind those stony gazes. The sheer mass of granite seemed less like a monument and more like a lid, sealing something inside that was never meant to be disturbed. The decision to shut down the monument immediately rather than gradually suggests that officials saw an urgent risk. Abrupt actions are rarely taken unless the situation demands it. That urgency feeds into the terror, hinting that whatever was discovered carried with it not only mystery, but danger. It was not enough to issue a notice of caution or restrict access to certain areas. The entire site had to be closed, and it had to be closed right away. Such decisiveness reveals a weight behind the discovery, one that authorities were not willing to gamble with. The implications stretch even further when one considers the symbolism of Mount Rushmore in global perception. Tourists from around the world see it as a representation of American ideals and history. Closing it under such circumstances sends a message far beyond domestic borders. It suggests that even the strongest symbols can conceal unsettling truths. It raises the question of how nations deal with secrets embedded in their most revered landmarks. The world, watching from a distance, could not help but interpret the shutdown as a metaphor for hidden cracks beneath the polished surface of history. Scientists and researchers undoubtedly were drawn into the investigation, their expertise required to analyze and contain whatever was discovered. Whether geologists examining fissures, biologists testing samples, or historians piecing together forgotten layers of the mountain's past, the discovery became a crossroads of disciplines. Each expert approaching it would carry not only scientific interest, but also a sense of awe, knowing they were confronting something powerful enough to shutter one of the most iconic sites in the nation. That intersection of science and mystery amplified the sense that this was no ordinary event. The public's reaction revealed much about how people view monuments. For many, the idea that Mount Rushmore could harbor a terrifying secret was both shocking and believable. It reminded them that monuments, for all their grandeur, are built on and within landscapes that have their own histories and mysteries. The idea that something terrifying had been found there reinforced the notion that nature and history cannot be fully contained by human design. Even in a place carefully shaped by dynamite and chisels, the mountain itself still had the final word, holding something no one expected. The silence surrounding the nature of the discovery also served another function. It forced people to confront the fragility of certainty. Visitors had always assumed that Mount Rushmore was just stone, carved and stable. To learn that officials had deemed something terrifying enough to shut it down reminded everyone that even familiar places can harbor the unknown. The everyday security of standing at the base of those stone faces was shattered, replaced with a reminder that the world is not as settled as it appears. The Black Hills have always been more than geography. They are contested, sacred, and layered with meaning. The shutdown of Mount Rushmore over a terrifying discovery tied back into that larger narrative, suggesting that the land itself had resisted being reduced to a monument. Whatever was uncovered forced a confrontation with that deeper truth, reminding all who witnessed it that the ground beneath monuments holds stories far older and perhaps far darker than the stone faces suggest. The moment the gates closed, Mount Rushmore ceased being a simple landmark and became a mystery. The terrifying discovery transformed it into something new, a symbol not just of presidents and politics, but of hidden dangers and untold histories. Its granite faces, once markers of stability, now seem to watch over a secret too powerful to be revealed casually. The monument, for the first time in living memory, became less about what could be seen and more about what lay hidden within. As the hours stretched into days, speculation only deepened. People returned to their homes with photographs of closed gates instead of the monument, sharing stories of how they had arrived just as the shutdown occurred. Those stories traveled faster than official explanations, spreading across social media and news outlets, each retelling adding another layer of dread. The terrifying discovery, unnamed and unseen, became larger in the collective imagination than any specific revelation could have been. It grew into a legend even as officials remained silent, the kind of legend that could outlive the monument itself. Mount Rushmore stands as a paradox now, its carved faces symbols of order and permanence, while within or beneath them lurks the reminder of chaos and fear. The terrifying discovery has forever changed how people see the monument, even if the details remain concealed. It is no longer just a destination on a map or a patriotic backdrop for photographs. It has become a place of mystery, a reminder that even the grandest human works sit atop landscapes that guard their own secrets. And those secrets, when revealed, can be terrifying enough to silence the steady march of tourism and history alike. The sudden shuttering of Mount Rushmore in the wake of a terrifying discovery sent shockwaves not only through South Dakota, but also across the entire country. While the initial closure stunned tourists who had expected to gaze up at the colossal faces of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln, the reverberations of that moment rippled far beyond the grounds of the Black Hills. In the silence that followed the announcement, questions began to expand outward like cracks in granite, branching into every corner of public life, from politics and academia to culture and identity. The shutdown was not a singular event locked away in the mountains. It became a prism through which deeper tensions and truths were refracted. One of the most immediate implications rested on the cultural psyche of the nation. Mount Rushmore had long served as a backdrop for patriotic rituals, films, and photographs. It was shorthand for permanence, the idea that history could be frozen in stone and immortalized. When news broke that a terrifying discovery lay within or beneath that same mountain, it shattered the illusion of permanence. Suddenly, the monument was not a shrine of certainty, but a site of fragility. For citizens who had grown up believing that their country's history was carved into an unchanging edifice, this disruption carried the weight of betrayal. It exposed the unsettling reality that even the most solid-seeming symbols could be undone by forces hidden in the earth itself. The educational sphere also found itself entangled in the consequences of the closure. Teachers, who often used Mount Rushmore as a symbol in classrooms when discussing democracy, expansion, or art, now faced a new challenge: how to explain to students why the monument was closed, and why officials refused to clarify the nature of the discovery. Lessons shifted from triumphalist narratives about visionaries and stone carvers to more sobering explorations of what lies beneath the surface of history. Students who might once have memorized names and dates now confronted discussions about uncertainty, secrecy, and the fragility of national symbols. This shift in focus altered the way younger generations would approach not only Mount Rushmore, but the very idea of monuments as repositories of meaning. Meanwhile, the political class grappled with its own crisis. For elected officials, Mount Rushmore had been a rallying point, a backdrop for speeches and gatherings where ideals were invoked against the grandeur of stone. The closure robbed them of that stage, transforming it from a symbol of unity into a source of unease. The terrifying discovery, left unnamed, created a vacuum that lawmakers scrambled to fill with speculation. Some demanded transparency, others urged caution, but all recognized the dangerous potency of mystery in the public imagination. The shutdown forced politicians to reckon with the fact that symbols could collapse faster than policies when confronted with the weight of the unknown. For indigenous communities, the closure carried a different resonance altogether. The Black Hills, long held sacred by the Lakota Sioux, had been at the center of disputes for generations. To many, Mount Rushmore was already a scar, a carving imposed upon land that had its own spiritual significance. The terrifying discovery reopened those wounds, reminding everyone that the land itself could not be fully silenced or controlled. To indigenous voices, the event underscored what they had long maintained. The land was alive, layered with meaning, and resistant to domination. The shutdown, therefore, became a moment of vindication as well as unease, as it suggested that forces far older and deeper than the monument had asserted themselves in a way impossible to ignore. The economic consequences spiraled outward as well. Hotels in Keystone and Rapid City reported empty rooms, tour buses idled in parking lots, and souvenir shops stocked with miniature busts and postcards gathered dust. The local economy, which relied so heavily on the steady stream of visitors to the monument, was jolted into sudden decline. Yet what made the situation worse was the uncertainty. Had the closure been due to repairs, businesses might have planned accordingly. But with the terrifying discovery left vague and unsettling, there was no timeline to cling to. This ambiguity eroded confidence, not just in business forecasts, but in the stability of the cultural economy built around Mount Rushmore. The fear that the monument might remain sealed indefinitely cast a long shadow over livelihoods tied to its image. The artistic community, too, found itself drawn to the event. Writers, filmmakers, and musicians seized upon the mystery as fertile ground for exploration. The terrifying discovery became a metaphor, a blank canvas onto which creative minds projected interpretations of fear, secrecy, and history's hidden layers. Plays and novels began to appear that used the closure as a symbol of disillusionment or rebirth. Documentarians flocked to the Black Hills, filming the closed gates and interviewing locals about their speculations. Art transformed the shutdown into something larger than itself, making it not only an event in history, but also a theme in culture. The terrifying discovery thus entered the realm of myth, feeding imaginations in ways that could endure long after any official explanation surfaced. International observers also noted the shutdown with fascination. For decades, Mount Rushmore had been a recognizable image abroad, a shorthand for American pride and resilience. To see it abruptly closed in response to a terrifying discovery sent ripples through global discourse. Commentators in other nations speculated on what the closure symbolized about America itself. Some saw it as evidence of hidden instability beneath a carefully maintained exterior, others as a lesson that every empire eventually confronts forces it cannot master. In this way, the shutdown became not just a national story but an international parable, used by allies and critics alike to interpret the state of the United States in the 21st century. Scientific communities responded with a different kind of intensity. Geologists debated whether fault lines, mineral formations, or ancient deposits could explain the situation. Biologists speculated about unique ecosystems hidden within the mountain, ecosystems that might pose risks to human health if disturbed. Anthropologists considered whether artifacts or burial sites might have been unearthed, carrying implications that demanded respect and secrecy. Each discipline brought its own lens, but all were united by the recognition that something extraordinary had occurred. For the scientific world, the terrifying discovery was not only a crisis, but an opportunity to push the boundaries of understanding about what could be concealed within iconic landscapes. The psychological effects on ordinary visitors also deserve attention. Families who had planned for months to see the monument returned home with stories of gates locked and hushed officials. Children who had hoped to marvel at the stone faces were instead left with a sense of confusion and dread. For many, this marked their first encounter with the idea that history and monuments are not invincible. Those formative experiences could shape how entire generations approach the concept of national identity, shifting it from uncritical pride toward a more nuanced and unsettled awareness of fragility and mystery. The closure, in this sense, worked like a seed planted in the public consciousness, destined to sprout in unpredictable ways. Media coverage, though starved of concrete details, magnified the event. News anchors replayed footage of empty parking lots and disappointed tourists, their commentary laced with urgency. Social media became a breeding ground for theories, ranging from plausible geological instability to wild claims about hidden vaults or ancient relics. The terrifying discovery thus became not only a fact but a narrative shaped by countless voices. In the absence of clarity, the story grew into a labyrinth of interpretations, each one adding fuel to the fire of uncertainty. The event highlighted how quickly silence from officials could be drowned out by the roar of speculation, a lesson in the uncontrollable nature of modern communication. Academic institutions found themselves rethinking how they discussed monuments and memory. Courses in history, political science, and cultural studies began to incorporate the shutdown into their syllabi. Professors asked students to consider what it meant when a monument designed to project permanence became a symbol of mystery. Libraries compiled archives of newspaper clippings and testimonies, recognizing that the closure itself, regardless of what had been discovered, was now part of history. The terrifying discovery, unnamed though it remained, had already left a legacy in the way institutions approached the relationship between history, land, and symbolism. The spiritual dimension of the closure also cannot be understated. For many, the event carried a sense of the uncanny, a reminder that human beings are not masters of their environment, but participants in a world filled with forces beyond their control. Pilgrimages to Mount Rushmore became impossible, but new forms of pilgrimage emerged. People traveled not to see the monument, but to stand at its gates, to witness its absence, to feel the tension of a place sealed by mystery. The act of visiting became less about the faces in stone and more about the void behind them, a void filled with speculation, fear, and awe. This transformation revealed the enduring human need to seek meaning even in silence. The closure also raised pressing questions about secrecy and governance. Who decided that the terrifying discovery warranted immediate shutdown? How much information was shared with the public and how much withheld? These questions sparked debates about transparency, with some arguing that citizens deserved to know the truth, while others insisted that the discovery was too dangerous or sensitive to reveal. The very act of withholding details transformed the event into a mirror reflecting broader concerns about trust in institutions. In this sense, the shutdown was not only about Mount Rushmore, but also about the relationship between government and the governed in times of crisis. Environmentalists saw the closure as a reminder of nature's resilience. The mountain, carved and blasted into a monument, had still managed to hold secrets of its own. Whether geological, biological, or otherwise, the terrifying discovery reminded humanity that landscapes are not inert canvases, but dynamic systems with their own hidden depths. For conservationists, the event underscored the importance of respecting natural environments, rather than assuming they can be fully controlled or exploited. Mount Rushmore, so often seen as a triumph of human will over stone, now stood as evidence that nature retains the last word. Even as speculation raged, the atmosphere surrounding the monument shifted from one of celebration to one of reverence tinged with fear. Those who once approached the site with cameras now approached it with caution, aware that something lay behind its silence. The terrifying discovery had fundamentally altered the relationship between people and the monument, turning it from a place of casual tourism into a locus of mystery. The shift in atmosphere was palpable, transforming the Black Hills into a landscape that demanded contemplation rather than consumption. The impact of the closure also stretched into national memory. Every nation has moments when symbols are disrupted, when the seemingly eternal is suddenly shaken. The shutting down of Mount Rushmore became one of those moments, etched into collective consciousness not for what was seen, but for what was unseen. It was a reminder that history is not static, that even monuments can be transformed overnight by forces beyond human control. In time, the terrifying discovery may be explained, but the memory of that sudden closure, the locked gates, the silence, the speculation, will remain as a story passed from generation to generation. The silence that enveloped Mount Rushmore after the closure grew heavier as days passed, and the weight of the terrifying discovery seemed to seep beyond the physical boundaries of the Black Hills. The monument's sudden inaccessibility had already altered the rhythms of tourism, politics, and culture, but deeper still were the ripples spreading across fields of inquiry and imagination. As people sought answers, new dimensions of the event emerged, each shedding light on the broader implications of what it meant for a monument of such magnitude to be locked away under mysterious and frightening circumstances. One of the most striking aspects was the way the discovery forced a re-examination of the engineering marvel behind Mount Rushmore. While most visitors only saw the immense stone faces, engineers had long been aware of the intricate inner structures created during its construction. The monument was not simply a carving on the surface of the granite. It contained unfinished tunnels, hollowed-out chambers, and hidden spaces meant for purposes that were never fully realized. The shutdown revived questions about those forgotten corridors. Were they merely relics of the construction process, or had they concealed something far more consequential? Engineers began discussing the possibility that the terrifying discovery was linked to those unseen spaces, prompting fresh debates about the relationship between monumental art and the natural geology it inhabits. Geologists in particular saw the closure as a moment of profound significance. The Black Hills are ancient, formed hundreds of millions of years ago, with layers of granite, pegmatite, and metamorphic rock telling stories far older than human history. The notion that a terrifying discovery was lurking within or beneath Mount Rushmore suggested that the geological narrative of the region was incomplete. Some theorized about unusual mineral formations that could pose unknown risks, while others entertained the possibility of ancient fossilized life forms sealed in the rock. To geologists, the shutdown was less about mystery and more about revelation, a reminder that the Earth itself still harbors secrets waiting to be unearthed. Anthropologists, on the other hand, turned their attention to the cultural context of the discovery. For centuries, the Black Hills had been revered as sacred by indigenous peoples, particularly the Lakota Sioux. Oral traditions spoke of spirits and guardians within the land, of places where the material and spiritual worlds intertwined. To hear that officials had shut down Mount Rushmore over something terrifying resonated deeply with those traditions. Anthropologists began to consider how the discovery might align with or even validate long-held indigenous narratives. The shutdown highlighted how monuments imposed by one culture can sometimes collide with the deeper histories and meanings embedded in the landscape by another. Historians approach the situation from yet another angle. Mount Rushmore, completed in the early 20th century, had always carried layers of political symbolism. Its closure now added a new chapter to its history, one defined not by construction or celebration, but by secrecy and fear. Historians noted how unusual it was for a monument of such stature to be closed indefinitely, especially for reasons framed as terrifying. They began documenting the closure itself as an event worthy of historical analysis, gathering testimonies from visitors, officials, and locals. For historians, the terrifying discovery became part of the evolving story of Mount Rushmore, one that revealed as much about contemporary anxieties as it did about the past. Even outside the academic world, the event reshaped conversations about the role of monuments in society. For decades, Mount Rushmore had been a site of both celebration and controversy. Its sudden closure transformed it into something else entirely, a reminder that monuments are not static but dynamic, susceptible to forces beyond human control. Artists and philosophers began to explore the symbolism of a sealed monument. Some argued that the terrifying discovery represented the suppressed truths of history rising to the surface, truths that could no longer be ignored. Others saw it as a metaphor for the limits of human ambition, a lesson that even the most carefully constructed symbols cannot outlast the mysteries of the natural world. The military and national security communities also took an interest in the shutdown. Mount Rushmore, after all, is not only a tourist destination but also a highly recognizable landmark with global visibility. The fact that it had been closed due to something described as terrifying raised questions about potential risks to public safety. Speculation grew about whether the discovery might have involved hazardous materials, biological threats, or even evidence of activity that officials feared could destabilize public confidence. For those in security circles, the closure underscored the vulnerability of national symbols, revealing how quickly they could shift from sources of pride to sources of potential crisis. As the days turned into weeks, public fascination only intensified. Visitors who could no longer enter the site began congregating at its periphery, treating the sealed monument as a kind of forbidden temple. People lined the gates, taking photographs not of the faces carved into the mountain, but of the barriers that now kept them away. In this way, the absence of access became its own form of spectacle. The terrifying discovery, unseen and unspoken, created a strange new attraction, the experience of being near something withheld. The psychology of desire, wanting to glimpse what was hidden, drew people in, even as the closure kept them out. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Mount Rushmore shutting down after this discovery? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.